that feeling when you are standing in a luxury lobby that smells like pine and champagne, realizing you do not belong. It is not because you are broke, but because your own blood decided you are optional. I watched my confirmed reservation vanish with one quiet sentence while my mother smiled like it was just logistics. In that moment, something inside me did not break. It clicked. If they could erase me that easily, I could disappear even easier. My name is Harper Rodriguez, and I am 31 years old. But walking into the lobby of the Cedar Glass Lodge made me feel like I was 7 again, waiting for a permission slip that was never going to be signed. The air outside in Whitefish, Montana, had been biting, a sharp, clean cold that filled your lungs with the scent of pine and impending snow. Inside, however, the air was curated. It smelled of expensive cedar smoke, vanilla, and the kind of heavy silence that only money can buy. I dragged my small carry-on suitcase across the slate floor, the wheels clicking rhythmically, a sound that seemed too loud in the cavernous, timber-framed space. My heart was doing that stupid, hopeful flutter against my ribs. I had told myself on the flight over from Arizona that this time would be different. This was my sister's wedding. Sloan was getting married to Grant Halstead, a man whose family practically owned the mountain range we were currently standing on. This wasn't just a ceremony, it was a coronation, and I, the invisible older sister, the waitress who picked up extra shifts to pay rent, had been invited. I had booked my room 3 months ago. I had paid the deposit. I had bought a dress that cost me 2 weeks of tips. I was trying, God, I was trying so hard to fit into the frame they had built. I approached the reception desk. The wood was polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the massive antler chandelier overhead. The woman behind the computer, whose name tag read Raina, looked up with a professional smile that faltered the second I gave her my name. "Checking in for the Rodriguez-Halstead wedding block," I said, forcing a brightness into my voice that I didn't feel. "Harper Rodriguez," Raina typed. Then she stopped typing. She clicked the mouse a few times, her brow furrowing in that specific way customer service workers do when they are about to deliver bad news but are trying to figure out the softest way to say it. The silence stretched. A log shifted in the massive stone fireplace across the lobby, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. "Ms. Rodriguez," Raina said, her voice dropping an octave, as if she were sharing a state secret. "I see your reservation here, but there seems to be a note on the file." "A note?" I asked. My grip tightened on the handle of my suitcase. "I have the confirmation email right here on my phone. I paid the deposit 3 months ago." "I see that," Raina said, and I saw genuine pity in her eyes. I hated it. Pity is just polite disgust. "But the room assignment has been adjusted. As of this morning, the suite you reserved has been reallocated to the master account of the wedding party." Reallocated. The word tasted like ash. "I don't understand. Is the hotel full? Completely?" Raina said gentle. "Every room in the lodge is booked for the weekend. The wedding party has exclusivity." "But I am the wedding party," I said, my voice rising just a fraction, desperation leaking through. "I am the bride's sister." "I know," Raina said, and she looked down at her keyboard. "There must be a mistake," I said, reaching for my phone to pull up the email, the digital shield I always used when the world tried to tell me I was wrong. "I have a confirmation number. Look, it starts with 49. "It is not a mistake. Harper." The voice came from behind me. It was cool, smooth, and terrified me more than any shout ever could. I turned around. My mother, Janine, stood there. She looked immaculate. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere wrap that probably cost more than my car, and her hair was coiffed into a rigid, perfect helmet of blonde. She didn't look angry. She looked bored. She reached up and adjusted her diamond necklace, a slow, deliberate movement that drew attention to the jewels resting against her throat. "Mom," I said, exhaling. "Thank God. There is a mix-up with my room. They said it was reallocated." Janine didn't blink. She walked past me to the counter. Placing a manicured hand on the wood, she didn't look at me. She looked at Raina. "Is everything settled with Mr. Crane's check-in?" "Yes, Mrs. Rodriguez," Raina said, her eyes darting between my mother and me. "Here are his keys." "Good," Janine said. She finally turned to me, her expression mild, like she was explaining why we couldn't have ice cream for dinner. "It wasn't a mix-up. Harper, Beckett Crane needed the suite. You understand?" I stared at her. The lobby seemed to tilt slightly to the left. "Beckett Crane, the investor guy, the partner. He is the financial partner for the Halstead development deal," Janine corrected me, her tone sharp. "He decided to come last minute. We didn't have any other VIP suites available." "So you gave him mine," I said. It wasn't a question. "He is vital to the family's future," Janine said, brushing a piece of invisible lint off her shoulder. "Grant's parents are trying to close a massive land deal in the valley. Beckett needs to be comfortable. It is just logistics. Harper, don't look so tragic." "Just logistics," I repeated. "Mom, I paid for that room. I saved for 3 months. I sent you the receipt." "We will reimburse you," Janine said, waving her hand dismissively. "The family account will cover your deposit. Honestly, Harper, don't make a scene. Not today. Not on Sloane's weekend." "I am not making a scene," I whispered, conscious of the bellhop standing 10 feet away. "I am standing here with my luggage and nowhere to sleep. You canceled my reservation without even calling me." "I didn't want to worry you while you were traveling," Janine said. "Besides, you are adaptable. You always have been." There it was, the code word, adaptable. It was the word they used to cover up the fact that they constantly bent me until I snapped, and then praised me for not screaming while I broke. Sloane was the porcelain doll. I was the rubber ball. You could throw me against the wall, and I was expected to bounce back. "Where am I supposed to stay?" I asked, my voice trembling. I hated that I was trembling. I wanted to be made of stone, like the fireplace, but I was just flesh and nerves. Janine sighed, as if my homelessness was a profound inconvenience to her schedule. She pointed a manicured finger toward the heavy glass doors, out toward the darkening mountains. "There is a motel down the pass," she said. "The Pine Cone, or something like that. It is about 20 minutes away. It is clean enough. I checked online." "The motel," I said flatly. "You want the sister of the bride to stay in a roadside motel 20 minutes away while a business partner sleeps in my room." "He is not just a partner. He is a crane," Janine hissed, her veneer of calm cracking just enough to show the steel underneath. "He is worth millions to this family. To your sister. Stop making this about you. For once in your life, Harper, just take one for the team." "I am always the team," I said. Feeling the sting of tears in my eyes, I refused to let them fall. "I am the only one on the team who ever gets cut." "You are being dramatic," Janine said, checking her watch, a Cartier tank that gleamed under the soft lighting. "I have to go. Sloane is having a crisis about the napkin folds. Put your things in your car and go check into the motel. And don't be late for the family photos at 5. The lighting is specific." She turned her back on me. She didn't wait for an answer. She just walked away, her heels clicking on the slate, marching toward the elevators that would take her up to the warmth, the luxury, and the daughter she actually wanted. I stood there, frozen. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on my shoulders. I felt stripped bare in the middle of this beautiful, expensive lobby. "Ms. Rodriguez." The whisper came from the counter. I turned back to Raina. She was looking around to make sure no one was watching. Her manager was busy on the phone at the far end of the desk. Raina slid a piece of paper across the polished wood. It was face down. "I am not supposed to show you this," she murmured, her eyes kind and angry at the same time. "But I have a sister too, and if our mom did this to her, I would burn the building down." I picked up the paper. It was a printout of the reservation log. I scanned the lines until I saw my name. There was a red strike-through line across Harper Rodriguez, and above it, typed in bold, was Beckett Crane. But it was the bottom of the log that made my stomach turn over. Authorized by Janine Rodriguez via guest portal. Timestamp 7:12 a.m. 7:12 in the morning. I looked up at Raina. 7:12. She did it first thing this morning, Raina whispered. Before you even got on your flight, we had a cancellation in the standard wing at 10 o'clock. A perfectly good room. I called your mother to see if she wanted to move you there so you could stay in the lodge. I felt the blood drain from my face. And what did she say? Raina hesitated, then leaned in closer. She said no. She said, and I'm quoting here, "Don't bother. She is used to roughing it. Save the standard room for the photographer's assistant." The world stopped. It wasn't just about Beckett Crane. It wasn't just about money or business or the Halstead deal. It was a choice, a deliberate, calculated choice to push me out. She could have kept me close. She could have put me in the standard room. Instead, she gave it to an assistant and sent her own daughter down the mountain to a motel. "Thank you," I said to Raina. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow, calm. "Thank you for showing me this." "I am really sorry," Raina said. "If I had a room, I would give it to you, I swear." "It is okay," I said. "It is not your fault." I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. It felt heavy, like a stone. I grabbed the handle of my suitcase. The cheerful click, click, click of the wheels sounded different now as I turned away from the desk. It sounded like a countdown. I walked past the guests who were arriving, people in fur coats and designer boots, laughing and hugging. They looked at me, dragging my luggage back out toward the door, and then looked away, their eyes sliding off me like I was a piece of furniture that had been placed in the wrong room. I pushed open the heavy timber doors and stepped out into the cold. The wind hit me instantly, freezing the moisture in my eyes. The sun was starting to dip behind the mountains, casting long purple shadows across the snow. The cedar glass lodge looked magnificent from the outside, a glowing castle of warmth and exclusion against the savage beauty of the Montana wilderness. I walked to my rental car, a beat-up sedan that sat huddled in the overflow lot, far away from the valets and the limousines. I opened the trunk and heaved my suitcase inside. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from a rage so pure and hot, it felt like I had swallowed a coal. I looked back at the lodge. I could see the silhouette of people in the lobby, moving back and forth. Somewhere in there, my mother was probably sipping champagne, telling Sloane that everything was handled, that Harper was fine, that Harper understood. Just logistics. I got into the driver's seat and slammed the door, sealing myself in the silence of the car. I looked at the digital clock on the dashboard. It was 3:45. The photos were at 5. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the piece of paper Raina had given me. 7:12 in the morning. She had erased me before I even arrived. She had decided I didn't belong in the picture long before the photographer would ever lift his camera. I started the engine. The heater blasted cold air before slowly turning lukewarm. I looked at the road that led down the pass, toward the cheap motel, toward the darkness, toward the place where they thought I belonged. And then I looked back at the lodge, glowing on the hill, for 31 years. I had tried to earn my way into that warmth. I had smiled. I had served. I had been the good daughter, the shadow, the support system. And for 31 years, it had gotten me nothing but a view of the fire from out in the cold. Something inside me didn't break. It clicked. It was the sound of a lock turning, shutting a door that I had been trying to pry open my entire life. "Fine," I said to the empty car. My voice was steady. "If they want me to disappear from the picture, then I will disappear from the story." I put the car in gear, but I didn't drive down toward the motel. I sat there for a moment longer, watching the steam rise from the exhaust, planning my next move. They thought they had sent me away to wait until I was needed. They were wrong. They hadn't sent me away. They had set me free. The heater in my rental car rattled like a dying lung as I navigated the switchbacks down the mountain. The majestic cedar glass lodge shrank in my rearview mirror until it was just a pinprick of warm, exclusive light against the darkening sky. Down here, on the road to the valley, the shadows were long and the air smelled less like expensive cedar and more like diesel and damp asphalt. Driving away felt pathetic, but it also felt inevitable. This was the pattern. This was the geography of my entire life map. Growing up, there was an unspoken constitution in the Rodriguez household. Article 1 stated that Sloane was the sun. She burned bright. She required constant fuel. And she possessed a gravity that pulled everything into her orbit. Article 2 stated that I, Harper, was the shadow. My job was not to shine. My job was to provide the contrast that made the light look brighter. I was the cooling shade where people rested when Sloane's intensity became too much. But I was never the destination. It started after our father, Nolan, left. I was barely 6 years old enough to remember the sound of the front door slamming, a sound that seemed to echo in our hallway for a decade. Sloane was a toddler, a bubbling, golden-haired distraction. Janine did not grieve the loss of her husband. She reorganized her assets. She looked at the empty space beside her and decided she would never be vulnerable again. But she also looked at us. When she looked at me, she saw Nolan's dark eyes and his quiet, brooding nature, the things that had failed her. When she looked at Sloane, she saw a blank slate she could paint into a masterpiece. So, Janine poured her terrified ambition into my little sister. Sloane did not just go to dance class. She was trained for the Royal Ballet until she got bored. She did not just get grades. She was groomed for valedictorian. I was simply raised. I was fed and clothed and sent to school. But I was maintained like a reliable appliance. While Sloane was curated like an art exhibit, I remember turning 16 and asking if I could take a creative writing course at the community college over the summer. Janine had sighed, the sound of a woman burdened by mediocrity, and told me that sure, I could go, as long as I could find a ride and it did not interfere with driving Sloane to her pageant coaching. I took the bus. I always took the bus. That dynamic followed me all the way to Mesa, Arizona. While Sloane was finishing her degree in communications at a private university paid for by the family trust, a trust I was told was reserved for high-impact investments, I was pulling double shifts at a diner called the Sunrise Griddle. My life in Mesa was a cycle of grease, burnt coffee, and the bone-deep ache of standing for 10 hours a day. I lived in a studio apartment where the air conditioning unit wheezed almost as loudly as my car. I was 31 years old, drowning in student loans from a state college degree that I had barely finished because I had to work full-time to survive. To the customers who snapped their fingers for refills, I was nobody, just a name tag that said Harper and a hand that delivered eggs. But I had a secret. I had a microphone. It was a cheap USB model I had bought at a pawn shop for $40, set up in the closet of my apartment between my winter coats and my hamper. Every Tuesday and Thursday night, after I scrubbed the smell of maple syrup out of my hair, I put on headphones. I did not use my name. I was just a voice in the dark. I wrote stories, not fiction, exactly, but retellings. I took the jagged, ugly shards of my life and I polished them until they were smooth stones. I told stories about a girl who lived in the shadow of a mountain and learned to speak the language of the caves. I told stories about mothers who were made of glass and daughters who were made of glue. I had a following, small, but loyal. They sent me emails saying my voice soothed their anxiety, that my stories made them feel less alone. I made exactly $0 from it. It was not a career, it was a lifeline. Once, about a year ago, I made the mistake of trying to share this with Janine. I was visiting for Christmas, sitting at the pristine kitchen island while Sloane was upstairs packing for a ski trip. I had just hit 5,000 subscribers. I was proud. The feeling was foreign and fragile, fluttering in my chest. "Mom," I had said, showing her the graph on my phone. "Look at this. People are actually listening. 5,000 people." Janine had glanced at the screen for less than a second. She did not look at the numbers. She looked at the cracked screen protector on my phone. "That is nice. Harper," she had said, returning to her salad. It is good you have a hobby to keep you busy. It keeps you out of trouble. It is not just a hobby, I had pressed, desperate for a crumb of validation. I am thinking about starting a Patreon. I could maybe monetize it. She laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. Monetize? Oh, honey, don't be silly. Sloan just closed a brand partnership with a skincare line for 6 figures. That is a career. That is destiny. Talking into a computer is, well, it is quaint. But when are you going to get a real job, something with benefits? I worry about you. Harper, you are so adrift. Adrift. That was her word for me, as if I were floating aimlessly, rather than frantically treading water to keep my head above the surface. I pulled the car into the parking lot of the Pine Cone Motel. The neon sign flickered. The letter O burned out. So it read, Pine Cine. The building was a long, low strip of brown doors with peeling paint. It was the kind of place where people stayed when they had run out of options, or when they were hiding. I parked next to a truck that was missing its bumper. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No texts asking where I was. Just a notification from the wedding planning app, reminding me that the rehearsal dinner started in 2 hours. This wedding, God, this wedding, Janine called it a match made in heaven. Everyone else in the county called it a merger. Grant Halstead was nice enough, I supposed. He had a square jaw, a firm handshake, and the personality of a well-maintained golf course. He was pleasant, predictable, and incredibly expensive. The Halsteads owned half the commercial real estate in Whitefish. The Rodriguezes had liquidity and social climbing aspirations. Sloan and Grant looked good together in photos, both blonde, both tall, both radiating that specific shine of people who have never had to calculate the sales tax on a grocery bill before getting to the register. I did not think they were in love. I thought they were in agreement. They were 2 corporations signing a contract to merge their assets and produce genetically superior heirs. And I was the unpaid intern of this merger. For the last 6 months, my phone had been a hotline for crisis management. I was the one who researched the biodegradable confetti because Sloan wanted to be eco-conscious, but did not want to do the reading. I was the one who handwrote the addresses on 300 envelopes, because Janine said my penmanship was serviceable and printers were tacky. I was the one who tracked down the vintage lace for the bouquet. Driving 4 hours across Arizona to a specific antique shop because Sloan had seen a picture on Pinterest. You are so good at the details. Harper, Sloan would say, tossing her hair. I am a big picture person. You are the worker bee. We need you. Worker bee. Indispensable until the hive is built. And then you just die quietly in the corner. I got out of the car and walked to the motel reception. The air here was colder, stripped of the lodge's artificial warmth. The guy behind the bulletproof glass looked at my dress, a nice navy sheath I had bought for the rehearsal dinner, and then at my battered suitcase. He chewed his gum loudly. $60 a night, he said. Cash or credit? Credit, I said, sliding my card under the glass. 2 nights. You here for the wedding up the hill? He asked, running the card. Something like that, I muttered. We get the overflow sometimes, he said, handing me a physical metal key attached to a green plastic diamond. Usually the photographers or the kitchen staff. Room 12, round back. I took the key. Room 12, not the Alpine suite with the jacuzzi tub and the view of the glacier. Room 12, with a view of the dumpster and the back of a mechanic shop. I dragged my suitcase around the building. The walkway was cracked, weeds poking through the concrete. I found my door and struggled with the lock for a moment before it clicked open. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon cleaner. There was a bed with a polyester spread in a violently floral pattern. A small desk in the corner was scarred with cigarette burns. Above the bed hung a faded print of a sad clown. I sat on the edge of the mattress. It sagged under my weight. I should be crying. I knew that. A normal person would be weeping right now. But the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I felt a strange clarity. It was the clarity of a scientist finally understanding the results of a long experiment. I had spent my life thinking that if I just worked hard enough, if I was useful enough, if I stayed quiet enough, I would eventually earn my seat at the table. I thought my family's love was a currency I could save up for, but the currency was fake. The economy was rigged. I reached into my purse and pulled out the leather-bound guest book. It was heavy, wrapped in cream-colored velvet. Sloan had shoved it into my hands yesterday morning before I left for the airport. "Don't trust the shipping," she had said. "Carry it on, and make sure you get the special pens, the archival ones. If the ink fades, I will kill you." I ran my hand over the velvet cover. I was the keeper of their memories. I was the guardian of their legacy. And they had thrown me into a motel room like a bag of trash they didn't want cluttering up the hallway. A memory flashed in my mind, sharp and stinging. It was from last night, the last time I saw Sloan before we all flew out. I was at her apartment, steaming her silk robe. She was sitting at her vanity, applying a face mask. I had asked her, tentatively, about the seating chart. I had noticed I was at table 19, near the kitchen doors, while her college sorority sisters were at table 4. "Oh, Harper, don't be tedious," Sloan had said, her voice muffled by the clay mask. She turned to look at me, her face a gray, hardened shell, her eyes bright and cold peering out from the mask. "It is just strategy," she said. "The tables up front are for people Grant's dad needs to impress. Networking. You are family. You don't need to be impressed. I just thought," I started. "Stop thinking," Sloan cut me off. "It gives you wrinkles." She stood up and walked over to me, grabbing my chin with her wet, clay-covered fingers. She tilted my face up. "Look," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "this weekend is the most important performance of my life. I am marrying into an empire. I need everything to be perfect. Perfect means no drama, no sad stories, no poor Harper vibes." She leaned in closer, until I could smell the eucalyptus in her mask. "Don't embarrass me," she said. "You are my sister, and I love you. But let's be real. You are not the main character here. You never have been. I just need you to exist in the right places. And stay invisible in the others." I sat in the motel room, staring at the sad clown on the wall. Exist in the right places, like a prop, like a coat rack, like a placeholder until someone more important, someone like Beckett Crane, needed the space. I looked at the clock. I had to get changed. I had to put on my makeup. I had to drive back up that mountain and smile and hold the guest book and guide people to their seats. Or did I? I stood up and walked to the window. The reflection in the glass was ghostly. I looked tired. I looked worn down. I looked invisible. But the thing about being invisible is that no one sees what you are doing until it is too late. I opened my suitcase, but I didn't reach for my dress. I reached for my laptop. If I was going to be invisible, I might as well haunt them. The next morning, I drove my rental car back up the mountain, the engine whining in protest against the incline. I did not pull up to the valet stand where the Porsches and Range Rovers were idling like well-groomed beasts. Instead, I drove past the main entrance, loop, and parked in the gravel lot designated for vendors and staff, tucked behind a grove of spruce trees. I told myself it was to save the valet fee. But the truth was sharper. I was hiding the evidence. My rusted sedan was a blemish on the visual perfection of the Halstead-Rodriguez merger, and I had been trained well enough to know that blemishes belonged out of frame. I walked the quarter-mile to the lodge in my heels, carrying a garment bag containing my bridesmaid dress. The air was crisp, biting at my exposed ankles, but the lodge was already buzzing with the manic energy of a wedding day. Florists were hauling in arches of white hydrangeas that probably cost more than my entire college education. The schedule said, "Family portraits," at 10 o'clock sharp on the south lawn. I changed in a public restroom near the kitchen, avoiding the bridal suite where I knew Sloan and Janine were currently sipping mimosas and getting airbrushed. When I emerged, wearing the dusty rose gown that Sloan had selected because it didn't distract from the bride, I made my way to the lawn. The setting was aggressively beautiful. The mountains provided a jagged, purple backdrop, and the light was that rare, high-altitude gold that photographers worship. The photographer, a man with a scarf and a camera lens the size of a telescope, was already shouting directions at Grant's family. Chin down. Mrs. Halstead Wonderful. Now, look at the mountain like you own it. Perfect. You probably do. Laughter rippled through the group. It was the easy, confident laughter of people who have never worried about an overdraft fee. I stood to the side, waiting. Janine was there, directing traffic. She looked at me, gave a tight nod that was less of a greeting and more of an inventory check to ensure I was wearing the right shoes, and then turned back to the photographer. Okay, let's get the Rodriguez side, the photographer yelled. Mother, bride, and who is that sister? Okay, sister, jump in. I stepped into the frame. The grass was soft, sinking under my heels. I stood next to Sloane, who looked breathtaking in a silk dressing gown before she put on the actual dress. She smelled of expensive perfume and stress. Okay, squeeze in, the photographer commanded. Sister, you are drifting. Come closer. No, not that close. We don't want to crowd the bride's train. Step back a bit. Left shoulder back. Make yourself smaller. Make yourself smaller. It was the mantra of my existence. I adjusted, twisting my body so that I took up less space, hiding half of myself behind Sloane's voluminous sleeve. Great, the photographer said, clicking away. Now let's do one with the groomsmen. Sister, can you step out? We need the symmetry. I stepped out. Okay, now the parents, he called. Sister, step back in. Wait, no, the lighting is weird on that side. Can you stand behind Mrs. Rodriguez? Just peek over her shoulder. Yes, like that. I stood behind my mother, effectively reduced to a disembodied head floating in the background. I smiled until my cheeks ached. Then came the moment that made the cold mountain air feel like a slap. All right. The photographer clapped his hands. The light is perfect right now. I want the immediate family shot. The core unit. This is the one for the mantle. Folks. I stepped forward, smoothing my dress, ready to take my place beside my mother and sister. Janine's hand shot out. It was a quick, precise movement, like a gate closing. Her palm pressed flat against my chest, stopping me in my tracks. Oh, wait, Janine said, her voice light and airy, carried on the wind. Just Sloane, Grant, and me for this one. We want to keep it focused. I froze. The photographer lowered his camera slightly, looking confused. Usually immediate family includes siblings, ma'am. We are going for a specific aesthetic, Janine said, her smile never wavering, her eyes hard as flint. Just the parents and the couple. It is cleaner. Harper, honey, you understand? Could you hold my purse? She thrust her clutch into my hands. I stood there, holding my mother's alligator skin bag, watching them rearrange themselves. Sloane didn't look at me. She was busy fluffing her train. Grant looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. He had learned quickly that crossing Janine was a bad business decision. They smiled. The shutter clicked. Click, 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 capturing the perfect family, the wealthy mother, the beautiful daughter, the powerful son-in-law. There was no gap where I should have been. The space closed up instantly, seamless and complete without me. I backed away, retreating until my back hit the rough bark of a pine tree. I felt like a ghost who had accidentally wandered onto a movie set. The rest of the day passed in a blur of servitude. I directed guests to the restrooms. I fixed a broken strap on a bridesmaid's shoe. I held the train. I fetched water. I was useful. Therefore, I was permitted to remain. By the time the reception started in the grand ballroom, my feet were bleeding inside my shoes. The room was a cavern of crystal and candlelight. The centerpieces were towering structures of white orchids and driftwood. I walked toward the front of the room, instinctively looking for my seat near the family. I scanned the place cards at table 1, Grant's parents, Janine, the bishop, no Harper. I checked table 2, bridesmaids, groomsmen, no Harper. I kept walking, moving further and further away from the head table, past the dance floor, past the dessert station. Finally, I found it. Table 19. It was the last table, positioned right next to the swinging double doors of the kitchen. Every time a waiter burst out with a tray of salmon, a gust of steam and the smell of dish soap hit us. I sat down, My table mates were a collection of leftovers. There was Grant's great-aunt, who was hard of hearing, a couple of cousins from a branch of the family nobody talked to, and a man named Mr. Henderson, who I think was a tax attorney for the firm. "So, what do you do?" Mr. Henderson asked me after the first course, stabbing at his salad. He didn't look at me. He was watching the head table. "I work in hospitality," I said. It wasn't a lie. "In Arizona." "Ah," he said, losing interest instantly. "I am in equity. This merger is going to be fantastic for the regional zoning profile. Grant's father is a genius." I looked toward the head table. It was raised on a platform, bathed in a soft, golden spotlight. And there, sitting in the seat of honor next to Grant's father, was Beckett Crane. He looked like a king. He was leaning back in his chair, a glass of scotch in one hand, laughing at something Janine was saying. Janine was glowing, leaning in toward him, touching his arm. She looked happier talking to him than she had ever looked talking to me. I realized then, with a sick, sinking feeling, that my room hadn't just been stolen. It had been sold. My comfort had been liquidated to purchase that seat at the high table. My mother had traded her daughter's dignity for a better view of a bank account. I needed air. The kitchen doors swung open again, blasting me with the smell of garlic and sweat. I stood up, grabbing my wineglass, and maneuvered my way through the tables. I intended to go to the bathroom, but the hallway was crowded with guests waiting in line. I ducked into a small alcove near the service bar to finish my wine in peace. That was when I heard the voice. Had to push the timeline up. Obviously, it was a deep, resonant voice, Beckett Crane. He was standing on the other side of a decorative screen, likely taking a private call or talking to an associate. "Don't worry about the environmental impact report," Beckett said, his voice dropping lower but still audible. "I have a guy in the county office who owes me. We are going to expedite the permits. By the time anyone realizes the drainage issues, we will have broken ground. The Halsteads are desperate to close before the fiscal year ends. They will sign anything I put in front of them." I stood frozen. Expedited permits, drainage issues, desperate to close. This wasn't just business. This sounded like fraud, or at least the kind of negligence that gets buried under piles of money. This was the vital partner my mother had thrown me out for, a man who was planning to cut corners on the very land they were celebrating. "Yeah, I am at the wedding now." Beckett laughed. "It is quite a show. The mother is eating out of my hand. I think she would sell me her own kidney if I asked. Or her daughter." I gripped my wineglass so hard, I thought the stem would snap. He wasn't talking about Sloane. He was talking about the dynamic. He saw the desperation in Janine. He saw how cheap we were. I stepped back, terrified he would see me, and bumped into someone. I spun around, gasping. It wasn't Beckett. It was a guy in a black t-shirt and cargo pants, holding a coil of XLR cable. He had messy dark hair and a lanyard that said Audio Tech. "Whoa, easy," he said, reaching out to steady my arm. "I didn't mean to spook you." "I am sorry," I stammered. "I was just getting out of the way." He looked at me, really looked at me, not the way the photographer looked at me, as an obstacle to be removed, or the way Janine looked at me, as a flaw to be corrected. He looked at my eyes, which I knew were glassy with unshed tears. "You are the sister, right?" he asked. "Harper." I blinked. "How do you know my name?" "I have the run sheet," he said, tapping a clipboard tucked under his arm. "I control the microphones. I know who is supposed to be speaking. I noticed you are not on the toast list." "No," I said, a bitter laugh escaping me. "I am not on the list." He paused, shifting the cable to his other hand. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a bottle of water. It was sealed, cold, and real. "Here," he said, offering it to me. "Hydrate. The wine is terrible anyway. Tastes like oak chips and ego." I took the water. "Thank you. You looked like you wanted to disappear back there," he said softly. At the table by the kitchen, I looked down at the bottle. Is it that obvious? I am the sound guy, he said with a shrug. I am paid to notice the things nobody else is listening to. I see who gets the spotlight and who gets muted. He looked toward the ballroom, where the band was starting up a loud, brassy cover of a Bruno Mars song. For what it is worth, he said, looking back at me. You are not invisible. You are just in the wrong room. Mason, a voice shouted from the stage. Check the monitor on stage left. Duty calls, he said. He gave me a small, crooked smile. Hang in there. Harper. He jogged away. I stood there, holding the cold water bottle, feeling a strange warmth in my chest. A stranger, a paid employee, had shown me more recognition in 2 minutes than my family had in 3 decades. You are just in the wrong room. I walked back into the ballroom, but I didn't go to my table. I skirted the edge of the dance floor. Sloane was there, spinning in the center, her dress flaring out like a white peony. Grant was dipping her. The guests were cheering. Janine was clapping, her face radiant with triumph. I walked past them. I walked right past Sloane. I was 3 feet away from her. I could see the sweat on her collarbone. I willed her to look at me. Just for a second. Just to acknowledge that I was there. That I was her sister. That I had driven across the country and slept in a dump to be here for her. Her eyes swept over the crowd. They passed over the guests, the waiters, the flowers. They passed over me. There was no flicker of recognition, no pause. I was just part of the background texture, like the wallpaper or the carpet. I wasn't hated. That would have required passion. I was simply unnecessary. I kept walking. I pushed open the glass doors and stepped out onto the terrace. The silence was sudden and absolute. The music was muffled by the thick glass. The wind was whipping off the lake, freezing the tears that finally spilled onto my cheeks. I walked to the stone railing and looked out at the darkness, below. The lights of the valley twinkled like fallen stars, behind me. Inside the glass box, the party raged on. I could see them moving, eating, laughing, closing deals, cementing their legacies. They looked like specimens in a jar. I looked at my reflection in the glass of the door. The sad pink dress, the tired eyes, the woman holding a water bottle like it was a lifeline. Beckett's words echoed in my head. She would sell me her own kidney, or her daughter. My mother hadn't just sold my room. She had sold my place in this family. She had made it clear that I was currency to be spent to buy Sloane's happiness. I took a deep breath of the freezing air. It hurt, but it felt clean. Okay, I whispered to the night. You win. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to scream or throw wine or grab the microphone. That was what they expected. That was what the emotional, unstable sister would do. I was going to do something far more terrifying. I turned my back on the warm, golden light of the ballroom. I walked toward the stairs that led down to the parking lot. If they want me to be invisible, I said, my voice hardening into steel, then tonight, I will finally oblige them. I was going to vanish. And this time, I wasn't coming back until they realized exactly how much space I had been taking up. I walked out of the ballroom before the knife touched the cake. The band was swelling into a crescendo, a drum roll anticipating the moment Grant and Sloane would feed each other the first bite of vanilla chiffon. Cementing their union in sugar and flash photography, the room was holding its breath. Every eye was fixed on the center of the dance floor. It was the perfect moment to cease to exist. I did not say goodbye to anyone. I did not wave to the table of distant cousins near the kitchen. I did not look back at the head table where my mother was likely dabbing a tear from her eye, or where Beckett Crane was probably checking his stock portfolio on his phone under the tablecloth. I simply turned around, pushed through the heavy glass doors, and stepped into the corridor. The silence of the hallway was jarring. My heels on the carpet made no sound. I felt like I was already a ghost. I retrieved my coat from the unattended cloakroom, grabbing it off the hanger myself. The attendant was inside watching the cake cutting. Even the help was part of the moment. I was the only one outside of it. I walked out into the night air. The cold was absolute. It did not bite anymore. It just numbed. I made the trek to the employee lot, the gravel crunching loudly under my feet. a solitary sound in the vast, dark wilderness. When I started my car, the engine roared to life, a rough, mechanical cough that shattered the peace of the wealthy mountains. I didn't care. Let them hear it. Let them hear the sound of the one thing in this valley that wasn't polished to a shine. I drove down the switchbacks for the second time in 24 hours. The darkness felt different this time. Yesterday, it had felt like exile. Tonight, it felt like cover. I pulled into the Pine Cone Motel. My room, number 12, was exactly as I had left it. The maid service hadn't come, probably because I hadn't put the sign out, or maybe because they just didn't care about people who stayed in number 12. The room was freezing. The heating unit under the window was silent. I walked over to check it and realized the window was jammed open about an inch. The latch was broken, rusted into a permanent state of failure. The wind was whistling through the gap, a high, thin keen that sounded like a tea kettle boiling in the next room. I grabbed a towel from the bathroom and stuffed it into the crack. It didn't stop the cold, but it muffled the sound. I sat down on the edge of the bed. My hand brushed against something velvet. The guest book. I had forgotten to bring it to the reception. It was still sitting there, heavy and cream-colored, resting on the cheap polyester bedspread. I stared at it. It was supposed to be circulating right now. It was supposed to be filling up with signatures and well wishes, with drunken scrawls of best wishes and love you guys. It was supposed to be the archive of their happiness, and I had left it here. I picked it up. It felt incredibly heavy, like I was holding a brick. I opened it to the first page. It was blank, pristine, waiting for history to be written on it, for 31 years. I had been this book. I was the thing they used to record their lives. I was the repository for their needs, their schedules, their anxieties, their secrets. I held it all so they didn't have to carry the weight. I was the blank page where they wrote their success, and I remained white, empty, and silent underneath the ink. I closed the book with a dull thump. I wasn't going to carry it anymore. I stood up and stripped off the bridesmaid dress. The zipper snagged, and I yanked it, not caring if the fabric tore. I let the dusty rose chiffon pool on the dirty carpet. I kicked it aside and pulled on my jeans and a thick sweater. I put on my boots. I felt my body returning to me, layer by layer. I sat at the scarred desk and opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue, illuminating the sad clown painting on the wall. I logged into my audio software. Usually, I had a script. Usually, I spent hours crafting the sentences, making sure the metaphors were perfect, polishing the pain until it was pretty enough to be consumed by strangers. Tonight, I had no script. I plugged in my microphone. The little red light blinked on. It looked like a warning, or maybe an invitation. I hit record. You know that feeling when you're standing in a luxury lobby that smells like pine and champagne? I said, my voice low and steady in the freezing room. And you realize you don't belong there, not because you are broke, but because your own blood decided you are optional. I paused. The waveform on the screen was a jagged black line, a visual representation of my voice cutting through the white noise. I watched my confirmed reservation vanish with one quiet sentence. I continued. I watched my mother smile like it was just logistics, and in that moment, something inside me didn't break. It clicked, because if they could erase me that easily, I could disappear even easier. I didn't tell them about the wedding. I didn't mention Sloane or Janine or Grant or the Halstead Empire. I didn't use names. I just talked about the room. I talked about the specific, hollow ache of being replaced by a business deal. I talked about the feeling of standing in a photo and being told to make yourself smaller until you effectively cease to exist in 3 dimensions. I spoke for 12 minutes. I didn't edit out the breaths. I didn't edit out the sound of the wind rattling the window frame. I didn't edit out the moment my voice cracked when I said the word mother. I saved the file. I titled it simply, Room Cancelled. I uploaded it to my anonymous channel. I didn't add tags. I didn't write a description. I just pressed publish and sent it out into the digital void. Then, I reached for my phone. It was fully charged. There were 3 unread messages in the family group chat. Sloane, where is the guest book? Janine Harper. Did you bring the pens? People are asking. Janine Harper. They weren't asking where I was. They were asking where the equipment was. I opened the back of my phone case. I used the small metal pin I kept on my keychain to pop the SIM card tray. The tiny chip looked harmless, just a sliver of gold and plastic, but it was a leash. It was the electronic chain that allowed them to yank me back whenever they needed a chore done or a scapegoat found. I took the SIM card out. I held it between my thumb and forefinger. Then, I dropped it into the half-empty cup of coffee I had bought yesterday morning. It sank to the bottom of the cold, brown liquid. I shut the laptop and shoved it into my backpack. I left the suitcase. I left the bridesmaid dress on the floor. I left the guest book on the bed. A blank testament to my absence. I only took what I could carry on my back. I walked out of the room and left the key in the door. I drove the rental car to the bus station in downtown Whitefish. It was a small, desolate building with fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry flies. I parked the car in the return lane, dropped the keys in the night deposit box, and walked inside. The woman at the counter looked like she had been awake for 3 days. "Help you?" she asked. "One ticket to Chicago," I said. "Next bus is in 20 minutes, she said, typing slowly. "That is a long haul. Honey, you got a transfer in Minneapolis?" "That is fine," I said. "One way or round trip?" "One way," I said. "Definitely one way." I paid with my own debit card. It drained half of my savings. But I didn't care. I needed to go to Chicago. There was a storytelling festival there next week, the Voice Narrative Summit. I had looked at the website 100 times over the last year, dreaming of going, but I had always told myself it was too expensive, too far, too selfish. Janine would have called it a frivolous distraction. Now, it was my destination. I sat on the hard plastic bench waiting for the bus. I opened my laptop one last time to check my email, just to make sure the bus ticket confirmation had come through. There was a new email in my inbox. The subject line was blank. The sender was frontdesksetterglass.com. My heart hammered. Had they found me? Was Janine already tracking me down? I opened it. It wasn't from Janine. It was from Raina. "Dear Harper, I am not supposed to do this. I could get fired. But I saw you leave yesterday and I saw your face. I have a feeling you are going to need this someday. It is the full system log of the transaction. It shows the IP address of the modification, the user ID, your mother's account, and the notes field where she typed the instructions. The note says, override existing res, priority to crane, do not notify guest. Good luck. The mountains are too cold for people with warm hearts. Raina. I stared at the screen. My vision blurred. Do not notify guest. She had explicitly typed it. It wasn't an oversight. It wasn't a mistake. It was a command. She wanted me to show up and be blindsided. She wanted me to be off balance so I would be easier to control. But that wasn't what made my throat tight. It was Raina, a woman I had met for 5 minutes, a woman who owed me nothing. She had risked her livelihood to give me a weapon. I downloaded the attachment and saved it to 3 different folders. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and fast. I had spent my whole life trying to extract love from my family like water from a stone, and here was a stranger, offering me a cup of water just because she saw I was thirsty. The bus pulled up outside, a massive silver beast hissing air brakes. The driver opened the door and stepped out to smoke a cigarette. I checked my phone one last time before I fully powered it down. It was still connected to Wi-Fi. A message popped up on the screen, an iMessage sent to my Apple ID. It was from Janine. Sent 2 minutes ago. Remember to return the rental items tomorrow. That was it. It was 1 a.m. I had vanished from the wedding. The guest book was missing. And she was texting me about the centerpiece vases and the tablecloths. She wasn't worried that I was dead in a ditch. She was worried about her security deposit. I looked at the message. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt light. The final tether had just snapped. I didn't reply. I turned the phone all the way off, the screen going black. I put it deep into my backpack. I boarded the bus. It smelled of disinfectant and old upholstery. There were only a few other passengers, a man sleeping with his hat over his eyes, a teenager with headphones, an older woman knitting in the dark. I walked to the back and found a window seat. I sat down and pulled my knees up to my chest. The bus lurched forward, pulling out of the station. We rolled through the sleeping town of Whitefish. We passed the turnoff that led up to the Cedar Glass Lodge. I didn't look up at it. I looked straight ahead at the highway, a ribbon of asphalt disappearing into the black void. The miles began to tick by. The mountains started to recede, their jagged teeth losing their bite as we descended toward the plains. I closed my eyes and leaned my head against the cold glass. The vibration of the engine hummed against my skull. It felt like movement. It felt like progress. Chicago was 1,000 miles away. It was a city of wind and noise and millions of stories. Nobody knew me there. Nobody expected me to hold their purse or fix their problems or be the shadow to their light. I was terrifyingly alone. I had no job, no apartment, and barely enough money to last a month. But for the first time in 31 years, the seat I was sitting in was mine. I had paid for it. I had chosen it, and nobody could take it away from me to give to a better investor. The sun would be coming up soon. The sky in the east was beginning to turn the color of a bruised plum. I watched the horizon. "Go ahead," I whispered to the reflection in the window. "Let them wake up and realize the shadow is gone." I pressed my hand against the glass. "From now on," I said, my voice barely audible over the hum of the tires. "If they want to find me, they have to earn it." Chicago hit me like a wet towel frozen solid by the wind off the lake. It was gray, loud, and aggressively indifferent to my existence, which was exactly what I needed. I did not want to be a daughter, or a sister, or a bridesmaid anymore. I just wanted to be a census statistic. I found a room in a neighborhood called Rogers Park, on the far north side where the train tracks ran so close to the buildings that my windows rattled every 8 minutes. The apartment was a garden unit, which is a polite real estate term for a basement that gets a little bit of sunlight if you stand on a chair. It cost me $800 a month. The landlord, a guy named Mr. Kowalski, who always smelled like sausages and bleach, did not ask for a credit check. He just asked for first and last month's rent in cash. I gave him almost everything I had left from my savings. My new life was not glamorous. It was a hustle. It was a montage of caffeine and sore feet. I got a job 3 days after I arrived at a coffee shop called The Grind on Clark Street. The manager, a girl with blue hair and a nose ring named Jax, hired me because I could carry 3 milk crates at once. My shift started at 5:30 in the morning. For 8 hours a day, I was a machine of steam and foam. I learned to make a latte in 40 seconds. I learned to smile at customers who threw their credit cards at me without looking up from their phones. I learned that in a city of 3 million people, you can stand behind a counter and be completely anonymous. But one job was not enough to pay Chicago rent and buy groceries that were not instant noodles. So I found a second one. In the evenings, I worked at a bookstore called The Dog-Eared Page. It was a chaotic, dusty labyrinth of shelves that smelled of vanilla and old glue. The owner, Tori, was a woman in her 60s who wore oversized cardigans and reading glasses on a chain. She hired me because I knew who wrote The Bell Jar without looking it up. "You look like you are running from something, honey," Tori had said on my first night, handing me a feather duster. "That is fine. We are all running from something here. Just don't steal the first editions." My days became a blur of motion. Up at 4, coffee shop until 1, nap for an hour, bookstore from 4 until 9. Sleep, repeat. It was exhausting. My bones ached. My hands were dry from washing dishes. But for the first time in my life, the exhaustion belonged to me. I was not tired because I was carrying my mother's emotional baggage. I was not tired because I was running errands for Sloan. I was tired because I was building a floor under my own feet. 2 weeks into my new life, I saw a flyer on the bulletin board at the bookstore. Spoken word storytelling open mic. Tuesday nights. The Red Room. I stared at it. The old Harper would have taken a picture of it and never gone. The old Harper would have told herself she was not ready, that she needed permission, that Tuesday. I swapped shifts with a coworker. I put on my best sweater. I walked to the Red Room, a dive bar with sticky floors and dim red lighting. The room was packed. People were drinking cheap beer and laughing. There was a sign-up sheet on a clipboard by the stage. I walked over to it. My hand was shaking so hard the pen rattled against the paper. I looked at the names: Mike, Sarah, J-Bone. I took a breath that tasted of stale smoke and courage. I wrote down my name. Not anonymous, not the spare room, Harper Rodriguez. I did not tell the wedding story that night. I told a story about a girl who learned to drive in a parking lot during a monsoon. It was 5 minutes long. When I finished, the applause was not polite. It was real. It was loud. I walked off the stage, and my knees finally gave out. I sat down at a small table, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "That was good," a voice said. I looked up. A woman was standing there. She looked like she was carved out of granite and expensive skincare. She was wearing a sharp blazer and holding a martini. "I am Daphne Cross," she said, extending a hand. "North Shore Audio Group." I shook her hand. "Harper." "I know," she said. She pulled out a chair and sat down without asking. "I was in the back. You have a voice. Harper, it is not trained. You breathe in the wrong places. Your pacing is a little frantic." I felt the old shame prickle at my neck. "Oh, I can work on that." "Don't," Daphne said sharply. "I don't want polished. I can hire an actor if I want polished. You sound like you are bleeding. People are starving for that." She reached into her bag and pulled out a tablet. "I heard your audio clip," she said. "The one called Room Cancelled." My stomach dropped. "How I posted that on an anonymous server." "Honey, nothing is anonymous if it is good," Daphne said. "It has been shared 40,000 times on Twitter in the last 3 days. Someone ripped it to TikTok and put sad piano music behind it. It has 2 million views there." 2 million? The number was so big it didn't make sense. It was just a sound. "People are connecting with it," Daphne continued, scrolling through her tablet. "Look at the comments. My mom did this to me at graduation. I am the invisible sibling too. This made me quit my toxic job. You tapped a vein. Harper, you gave a voice to every person who has ever been treated like furniture by the people supposed to love them." She slid the tablet across the sticky table. It was a contract. "I want to produce a limited series," Daphne said. 6 episodes, pilot season. We call it The Spare Room. You tell your stories, the real ones, the ugly ones. We pay you $5,000 an episode." $5,000. That was more than I made in 3 months at the diner in Mesa. "Why?" I asked. "Why me?" "Because you are angry," Daphne said, taking a sip of her martini. "And you are articulate. That is a dangerous combination, and it is very profitable." I looked at the contract. I looked at my name printed at the top. Harper Rodriguez. "I will do it," I said. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I cut my hours at the coffee shop, but I kept the bookstore job because I loved the smell. I started going to the North Shore Studios, a sleek glass building downtown. I also found something I never expected to find. I found a tribe. It started with Tori at the bookstore. When I told her about the podcast, she didn't ask if it was a real job. She bought a bottle of champagne and toasted me in the back room among the biographies. Then there was the group from the open mic night, a poet named Marcus and a stand-up comic named Lena. We started grabbing tacos after shows. We talked about rent and art and trauma. They didn't care who my family was. They didn't care about the Halstead merger. They just liked that I bought the extra guacamole. And then there was the text. I hadn't thrown away my old phone yet. It was sitting in a drawer in my apartment, turned off. I had bought a new burner phone for my Chicago life, but I couldn't bring myself to destroy the old one. It was like keeping the ashes of a pet. One night, I turned it on, just to see. The notifications flooded in. 50 missed calls from Janine, 20 angry texts from Sloan about the missing guest book, a threat of legal action from a lawyer regarding defamation of character if I didn't take down the audio clip which they had evidently found. But buried under the hate was one message from a number I didn't have saved. But I recognized the area code. Hey, it is Mason, the sound guy. I saw the viral clip. I recognized the voice immediately. I just wanted to ask, are you okay? You don't have to reply. Just hope you are safe. The view from the terrace was too cold for anyone to stay out there long. I stared at the screen. Mason, the guy who gave me water. The guy who told me I wasn't invisible. He hadn't asked for anything. He hadn't told me to call my mother. He just asked if I was okay. I made a decision. I saved the audio files of the voicemails from Janine Evidence. Daphne had taught me that. I took screenshots of Sloane's texts. Then, I replied to one person, I am okay. I am more than okay. I am in Chicago. Here is my new number. Don't give it to anyone. I hit send. Then I took the SIM card out of the phone again. I walked to the kitchen, turned on the garbage disposal, and dropped the little plastic chip into the grinding metal teeth. It made a terrible, satisfying crunch. I wasn't doing it for revenge. I wasn't doing it to hurt them. I was doing it because you cannot heal in the same place where you got sick. I was closing the door so I could finally open a window. The next morning, I walked into the recording booth at North Shore Audio. It was a small, soundproof room padded with acoustic foam. It was silent, dead silent. I sat in the chair. I put on the heavy headphones. I adjusted the microphone. Through the glass, Daphne gave me a thumbs up. Rolling when you are ready, Harper. I closed my eyes. For 31 years, I had been trained to be quiet. I had been trained to edit myself down to a palatable soundbite. I had been trained to hold my breath so I wouldn't use up the air in the room that was meant for Sloane. I took a deep breath. I heard it in the headphones, the rush of air filling my lungs. It sounded loud. It sounded alive. I opened my eyes. I looked at the microphone. It was waiting for me. My name is Harper Rodriguez, I said, and my voice was steady, resonant, and undeniably mine. And this is the story of how I stopped saving a seat for people who never wanted me at the table. I wasn't disappearing. I was finally, for the first time in my life, coming into focus. The numbers on the screen were abstract, but the noise they made was deafening. My podcast, The Spare Room, had hit #1 on the storytelling charts in 3 countries. I stared at the analytics dashboard on my laptop, sipping coffee that I had paid for with money I earned from my own voice. 2 million downloads. It was a number so large it felt fictional. Like the distance to the moon. With the numbers came the emails. Not the hate mail from my family, I had blocked those avenues, but inquiries. Real, lucrative inquiries. A mattress company wanted to sponsor the next episode. An online therapy platform offered a contract that was worth more than my car. A university in Oregon wanted me to fly out and speak on a panel about narrative reclamation. I should have been popping champagne. Instead, I was hyperventilating in my kitchen. Success. I was learning. Felt suspiciously like exposure. For 31 years, safety had meant invisibility. It had meant blending into the drywall so Janine would not criticize my outfit or Sloane would not ask me to run an errand. Now, the spotlight was swinging toward me, huge and blinding, and my instinct was to dive under the table. Daphne Cross would not let me hide. You are a brand now, Harper, she told me in her office. Sliding a stack of documents across her glass desk, the view behind her was of the Chicago skyline, steel and ambition rising out of the fog. And brands need armor. I don't feel like a brand, I said, picking up the papers. I feel like a fugitive. That is the imposter syndrome talking, Daphne said, clicking her pen. Listen to me. These are copyright filings. We are trademarking the show title. We are registering your content, because right now, you are the underdog darling of the internet. But give it a month, and the sharks will smell blood. They will try to steal your format, your story, your tagline. We are building a fence around you. She looked at me. Her eyes sharp, but not unkind. You are used to giving everything away for free. Harper, your time, your labor, your dignity, that stops now. Nobody touches your story unless they pay the admission fee. I signed the papers. My hand was steady, even if my stomach was churning. It was at one of Daphne's industry mixers that I met Elliot Vance. I was standing near the cheese platter, calculating the fastest exit route, when a man in a rumpled corduroy jacket bumped into the table. He wasn't slick like the marketing guys in the room. He had messy hair and tired eyes, and he was holding a plate with 4 deviled eggs on it. "I know," he said, catching me staring at his plate. "It is aggressive, but I skipped lunch to edit, and these are free." I laughed. It was a genuine laugh, sudden and surprising. I was eyeing the brie myself. "I am Elliot," he said, shifting the plate to extend a hand. "I make documentaries, currently starving." "Harper," I said. "I make audio." "I know," he said. The playfulness vanished from his face, replaced by a serious, intense gravity. "I listened to episode 3 this morning, the one about the birthday party that wasn't. It wrecked me." I tensed, waiting for the pity, waiting for the awkward, "I am so sorry your mom is a monster" speech. "Your pacing is incredible," he continued. "The way you hold the silence before the reveal, that is masterful editing." He didn't pity me. He respected me. We ended up talking for 2 hours in the corner of the room. Elliot told me about his project. He was filming a documentary about families that looked perfect on Instagram, but were rotting from the inside out. He wasn't interested in the scandal. He was interested in the psychology of the facade. "It is about the cost of maintenance," Elliot said, leaning against the wall. "How much energy it takes to keep the cracks from showing. You know." "I know," I said softly. "I was the spackle." He looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was being evaluated. I felt like I was being seen. We started seeing each other. It wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was slow, cautious, like 2 people walking on ice, testing the weight with every step. He took me to a jazz club in Green Mill. He took me to a dumpling shop in Chinatown where the menu was only in Mandarin, and he ordered for us in broken, enthusiastic Chinese. The strangest thing was the lack of transaction. One night, after he cooked dinner for me at his apartment, a cluttered, cozy space filled with film reels and books, I immediately stood up to do the dishes. It was a reflex. If someone feeds you, you work. That was the law of the Rodriguez house. "What are you doing?" Elliot asked, catching my hand as I reached for the sponge. "Doing the dishes," I said. "You cooked." "So," he said, "you are my guest. Leave them. We will do them later, or I will do them tomorrow. Come sit on the couch. I want to show you this clip." "But I should help," I insisted, anxiety spiking in my chest. If I wasn't useful, why would he want me here? Elliot gently took the sponge out of my hand and set it down. He turned me around to face him. "Harper," he said, his voice low, "you don't have to pay rent for my affection. You are allowed to just exist in this space." I stood there in his kitchen, surrounded by the smell of garlic and old paper, and felt tears prick my eyes. It was a foreign language he was speaking, kindness without a price tag. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay," he smiled. My financial situation was changing rapidly. The sponsorship money hit my account, and for the first time in my adult life, the balance had a comma in it. I sat at my kitchen table and logged into the student loan portal. I typed in the full payoff amount, $13,000. It was a fortune. It was the chain that had kept me tethered to double shifts and despair. I clicked Submit Payment. The screen loaded, then a green checkmark appeared. Paid in full. I waited for the euphoria. It didn't come. Instead, panic set in. What if something happened? What if the show got canceled? What if I got sick? I had just emptied my safety net. I went to the bank the next day and withdrew $3,000 in cash. I took it home and put it inside a hollowed-out copy of Great Expectations. I hid the book under my bed. It was irrational. I knew that. I had money coming in. I had a contract. But the girl who had been kicked out of her room at the Cedar Glass Lodge didn't trust digital numbers. She trusted only what she could hold in her hands when she had to run. I moved into a better apartment. It was still in Rogers Park, but it was on the second floor. It had sunlight, it had a dishwasher, it had a second bedroom that I turned into a studio. I bought a rug. I bought a coffee maker that wasn't from a thrift store. I bought a plant and named it Raina, after the receptionist who had saved me, but I still flinched when my phone rang. One evening, Elliot and I were walking along the Riverwalk. The city was lit up, the buildings reflecting in the dark water like pillars of fire. The wind was cold, but Elliot had wrapped his scarf around my neck. "You seem far away tonight," he said, bumping his shoulder against mine. "I am just waiting," I admitted. "It feels too good. Elliot, the show, the money, you. In my experience, this is the part where the rug gets pulled out." We stopped walking. We were standing under a bridge, the steel girders humming with the traffic overhead. "The rug isn't going to get pulled," Elliot said, "because you are the one weaving it this time." "You don't know my family," I said, looking at the water. "They don't let things go. If they see me rising, they will try to cut the string." "Let them try," Elliot said. He reached out and took my hand. His grip was warm and solid. "You have people now. Harper, real people, Daphne, the bookstore crew, me. We aren't going to let you fall." He stepped closer, blocking the wind. "You don't need to prove you belong here," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "You take up space, Harper, and it is good space. The world is better because you are occupying it." I looked at him. This man who saw the wreckage of my past and didn't turn away. I leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't a movie kiss. It was desperate and real. A seal on a promise I was terrified to believe. We walked back to my apartment in a comfortable silence. When I got inside, the red light on my laptop was blinking. I had a new email. It was sent to my public business address, the one Daphne managed, but she had forwarded it to me with a note. "Don't panic, just FYI." The subject line was "Inquiry regarding HR." I opened it. It was from an anonymous account. Something generic like Watcher88. "Ms. Rodriguez, I thought you should know. People are asking around. A private investigator called the diner in Mesa yesterday asking for shift logs from 3 years ago. They are looking for dirt. They are looking for anything to discredit the timeline. Be careful. They know you are in Chicago." I felt the blood drain from my face. A private investigator. Janine wasn't just mad. She was mobilizing. She was spending money, real money, to dig up the bones of my life, looking for something she could use to break me. "Harper," Elliot asked, seeing my face. "What is it?" "They are hunting," I said, my voice hollow. I sat down on the couch, my hands trembling. I thought I had escaped. I thought changing my number and moving across the country was enough. But money has a long reach, and malice has an even longer memory. I spent the next 2 days in a state of high alert. Every time I walked to the train, I checked over my shoulder. Every time a car slowed down near me, I tensed, ready to run. Daphne told me to ignore it. "Let them dig," she said. "You have nothing to hide. You were a waitress who paid her taxes and went to the library. There is no scandal." "You don't understand," I told her. "They don't need a scandal. They just need a thread. If they pull it, they think they can unravel me." Then, the other shoe dropped. It was a Tuesday morning. I was at the coffee shop not working, just visiting Jack's when my phone started buzzing. Not a call, notifications, Twitter, Instagram, email. It was a deluge. I opened Twitter. The hashtag "The Spare Room" was trending, but this time, it was accompanied by another name. I clicked on the top link. It was an article from The Gilded Cage, a popular entertainment gossip blog known for unmasking anonymous creators. The headline was in bold, black letters that looked like a tombstone. "Is the voice of the Spare Room actually the exiled daughter of the Montana Rodriguez dynasty?" "We have the receipts." I stopped breathing. I scrolled down. There were photos, not new ones, old ones, a blurry photo of me in the background of one of Sloane's Society debutante pictures from 5 years ago, a photo of me serving tables in Mesa, and then a side-by-side comparison of my chin and Sloane's chin. The text was worse. Sources close to the prominent Halstead-Rodriguez family in Whitefish suggest that the viral sensation known only as Harper is actually Harper Rodriguez, the estranged sister of socialite Sloane Halstead. The family claims the podcast is a work of vindictive fiction created by a troubled sibling with a history of mental instability. Troubled. Mental instability. There were the buzzwords. Janine's fingerprints were all over the article. She hadn't just found me. She had launched a preemptive strike. She was painting me as the crazy one before I could even say my own name. I looked up. The coffee shop looked the same. The espresso machine hissed. Jax was wiping the counter, but the world had tilted on its axis. The anonymity was gone. The shield was shattered. I looked at the screen again. The name Rodriguez stared back at me. It wasn't just a name anymore. It was a target. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. They wanted a war. They wanted to drag me back into the light so they could burn me. I grabbed my bag. I wasn't going to run. Not this time. If they wanted Harper Rodriguez, they were going to get her. All of her. The phone call that turned my life from a drama into a crime scene happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of editing the 4th episode of the podcast. The audio waves were dancing on my screen, my voice narrating a story about a birthday cake that was bought for a client instead of a daughter. My phone buzzed against the desk. It was an unknown number. Usually, I let those go to voicemail, assuming it was a reporter fishing for a scoop or Janine calling from yet another burner phone. But this time, I answered. I don't know why. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was the specific, persistent dread that had been sitting in my stomach since the blog post came out. "This is a call for Harper Rodriguez," a voice said. It wasn't a person. It was that clipped, aggressive tone of a debt collector who has made too many calls that day. "Speaking," I said, putting down my headphones. "Ms. Rodriguez, this is Apex Financial Services. We are attempting to collect a debt of $42,580 associated with your bridal expense account. This account is now 90 days past due." I froze. The room went silent. "I think you have the wrong person," I said, my voice calm but tight. "I didn't have a wedding. I don't have a bridal expense account." "Is this Harper Marie Rodriguez?" the man asked. "Social Security ending in 49. My stomach dropped. "Yes. Then the debt is yours. Ma'am, it was opened 6 months ago. The primary charge is for venue overages and luxury accommodations at the Cedar Glass Lodge. If you do not set up a payment plan today, we will be forced to escalate this to legal proceedings." I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't find the trackpad on my laptop. I logged into a credit monitoring site. I hadn't checked it in months because I had been terrified of seeing my student loans, even after I paid them off. I typed in my password. The page loaded. There it was, a red flag waving in the middle of my financial history. A line of credit for $50,000. Opened 6 months ago. I clicked on the digital signature file attached to the loan agreement. It was a PDF at the bottom of the page. In perfect cursive script was my name, Harper Rodriguez. I stared at it. It wasn't my signature. The R was looped too high. It was the way I used to sign my name in high school, before I changed it in college. But the security questions, I clicked deeper to open this account online. The applicant had to answer 3 security questions: mother's maiden name, name of first pet, high school mascot, Barnaby, the Bulldogs. Only one person knew the name of the golden retriever we had when I was 5. Only one person knew my social security number by heart, because she had kept my card in her safe for safekeeping until I was 25. Janine. She hadn't just kicked me out of the hotel. She had used my credit to pay for it. She had forged my signature to open a line of credit to cover the costs of the wedding she had barred me from enjoying. I was the financier of my own humiliation. I didn't scream. I grabbed my coat. I ran to Daphne's office. I didn't make an appointment. I burst past her assistant and threw my laptop onto her glass desk. "She stole my identity," I said, gasping for air. "My mother, She took out a $50,000 loan in my name to pay for the wedding. Daphne didn't look shocked. She looked like a general assessing a battlefield. She picked up her phone. "Cancel my lunch," she told her assistant. Then she looked at me. "Get your coat. We are going to see Kendra." Kendra Miles was a lawyer who operated out of a converted loft in the West Loop that smelled of espresso and expensive leather. She wore a suit that looked sharp enough to cut glass. She listened to my story without blinking, her fingers flying across a keyboard. "It is fraud," Kendra said, her voice flat. "Clear cut. But proving it is the tricky part. We need to trace the IP address of the application." She worked for 20 minutes in silence while I paced the room. Daphne poured me a glass of water. "Here is the interesting part," Kendra said, spinning her monitor around. "The creditor isn't a standard bank. It is a private lending firm called High Altitude Holdings. They specialize in high-risk bridge loans for real estate developers." "Real estate?" I asked. "But the collector said it was for wedding expenses." "It was," Kendra said. "But look at who backs High Altitude Holdings. It is a subsidiary of a larger equity firm." She clicked a few keys. A complex web of corporate names appeared on the screen. "Crane Capital," Kendra read. I felt the air leave the room. Beckett Crane. "Wait," I said, stepping closer to the screen. "Beckett Crane is the investor. He is the partner. Why would his company be lending money to my mother for a wedding he was attending?" Kendra's eyes narrowed. She started digging deeper, pulling up SEC filings and public trade records. "Harper," Kendra said slowly, "Beckett Crane isn't a partner. He is a ghost." "What do you mean?" "I am looking at his liquidity," Kendra said, "or lack thereof. Crane Capital is leveraged to the hilt. He has been moving the same $10 million between 5 different shell companies to make it look like he has $50 million. He is running a shell game, a Ponzi scheme wrapped in luxury real estate." I stared at the screen. The man who had sat in my seat, the man my mother had worshipped, the man who was supposed to save the Halstead empire, was broke. "He needed the Halstead deal," I whispered, the realization dawning on me like a cold sunrise. "He didn't invest in them. He needed their land assets to collateralize his own debt. He is using them. And he is using you," Kendra added. "This loan. It wasn't just to pay for flowers. Look at the terms. The interest rate is 40%. It is predatory. Janine probably couldn't qualify for traditional financing because she is overextended on the wedding. So Beckett said, 'Hey, I have a guy who can help.' He directed her to his own shell company. He lent her money at insane interest rates. Knowing she would use your identity because she has maxed out her own. It was a perfect circle of parasitism. Beckett was feeding on Janine's desperation. And Janine was feeding on my credit score. Suddenly, a memory flashed in my mind. The terrace, the smoke, the voice through the screen. I have a guy in the county office who owes me. We are going to expedite the permits. He is doing something illegal with the land," I said. "I heard him. At the wedding. He was bragging about bribing officials to fast-track permits before anyone noticed drainage issues." Kendra stopped typing. She looked at me. "You heard him say that?" "Yes," I said. "He was on the phone. He said the Halsteads were desperate to close." "Harper," Daphne said, leaning forward. "This is big. This isn't just identity theft anymore. This is corporate fraud. If the Halsteads sign that deal, they are going to be liable for environmental damages and federal investigation. They will lose everything." I stood there, paralyzed. I hated them. I hated Janine for selling me out. I hated Sloan for letting it happen. I hated Grant for his indifference. But did I hate them enough to let them walk off a cliff if I report this? I said. If I report the identity theft and the fraud, what happens? "The police get involved," Kendra said. "Your mother gets arrested for forgery and identity theft. The wedding loan gets voided. But the investigation will freeze the Halstead assets. The merger dies. Beckett goes to prison. Your family, well, they will be front-page news for a very different reason." It was the nuclear option. It would destroy Janine. It would humiliate Sloan. It would end the life they had built. And it would drag me right back into the center of the mess. I would be the witness. I would be the whistleblower. I would be the daughter who sent her mother to jail. I can't do it, I said, turning away. I just got free. I can't go back there. I can't be Harper Rodriguez, the tragic victim, again. You don't have to be the victim, a voice said from the doorway. It was Elliot. Daphne had texted him. He looked out of breath, like he had run all the way here. You can be the source, Elliot said. He walked over to me and put his hands on my shoulders. Harper, you don't have to go to the police today. You don't have to file the report yet. But you can't let a guy like Beckett Crane win. He is doing this to hundreds of people. You are just one name on a list. So what do I do? I asked, my voice trembling. We talked to a journalist, Elliot said. I have a friend at the Tribune. She is an investigative reporter. She handles white-collar crime. We give her the tip about Beckett. We give her the lead on the shell companies. She does the digging. She exposes him. You stay anonymous until you are ready. And the loan? I asked. The $50,000 on my credit report. We freeze it, Kendra said. We file an affidavit of fraud claiming unknown perpetrator for now. It stops the collections. It buys us time. I looked at Elliot. He wasn't trying to save me. He was handing me a sword and asking if I wanted to swing it. Okay, I said. Call your friend. We spent the next 3 hours in Kendra's office, drafting the narrative. We didn't mention Janine's name. We focused on high-altitude holdings and Crane Capital. We focused on the predatory lending and the fake permits. By the time we left, the sun was setting over Chicago. The city looked bruised and beautiful. I went back to my apartment. I felt drained, hollowed out by the adrenaline. I sat on my bed. My backpack was in the corner. I hadn't unpacked it fully since the day I arrived. I reached into the front pocket and pulled out the crumpled piece of paper Raina had given me, the log file from the hotel. I had read the top part 100 times. Authorized by Janine Rodriguez. Priority to Beckett Crane. But I had never read the second page. Raina had stapled a second sheet to the back. The technical metadata of the reservation system. I smoothed it out on my duvet. There, in the section labeled Guest Notes/Special Instructions, was another entry. It was time-stamped 2 weeks before the wedding. User Janine Rodriguez, Action Seating Chart, Modification Note, Move HR to Table 19. Keep Harper out of head table rotation for toasts. Ensure microphone does not go to her side of the room. We need a clean run of show. I read it again. Ensure microphone does not go to her side of the room. The identity theft was about money. The room cancellation was about logistics. But this was about my voice. Janine hadn't just been afraid I would look bad. She was afraid I would speak. She had engineered the entire evening to silence me. She had moved me to the kitchen, stripped me of my status, and instructed the staff to physically keep the microphone away from me. She knew, deep down, she knew I had a voice, and she was terrified of it. The debt didn't hurt anymore. The fraud didn't hurt. What hurt was the realization that my mother had spent weeks planning my silence with the same precision she used to plan the floral arrangements. I folded the paper. Clean run of show, I whispered to the empty room. I picked up my phone. I opened the contact for the journalist Elliot had introduced me to. I typed a message. I have the documents on Crane, but I have something else too. I have the story of how a family sells their own blood to buy a fake future. I hit send. They had stolen my name. They had stolen my credit. They had tried to steal my voice, but they forgot one thing. When you take everything from someone, you leave them with nothing to lose, and people with nothing to lose are the most dangerous people in the world. Visibility. I learned. Acts like a beacon. It attracts two kinds of people, those who want to hear your story, and those who are terrified you will finally tell it. For weeks, I had been operating in the shadows, a voice without a face, a ghost haunting the internet. But the Gilded Cage article had ripped the mask off. Suddenly, Harper Rodriguez was not just a viral audio clip. I was a person. I was a person who went to grocery stores, who rode the L train, and who attended industry galas on the arm of a documentary filmmaker. A photographer from a local society page had snapped a photo of Elliot and me at a fundraising dinner for the Chicago Arts Council. It was a candid shot. Elliot was whispering something in my ear, and I was laughing, my head thrown back, looking alive in a way I never had in the family Christmas cards. The caption was simple: Podcasting breakout star Harper Rodriguez with director Elliot Vance. It wasn't a scandal. It was worse. It was proof that I was thriving. I was in my kitchen, watering Raina the spider plant. Not the receptionist. When my phone began to vibrate, it was a number I did not recognize. But the area code was 406, Montana. I stared at it. The old Harper would have let it go to voicemail. The old Harper would have felt a surge of nausea and hidden in the bathroom. But the new Harper had a lawyer, a boyfriend who loved her, and a bank account that belonged only to her. I swiped right. "Hello?" I said. My voice was calm. "You have a lot of nerve." It was Janine. There was no greeting. No, "Hello, daughter." Just the sharp, breathless anger of a woman who realizes she is losing control of her favorite asset. "Hello, Mother," I said. Putting the phone on speaker and setting it on the counter, I continued to water the plant. "Don't you hello me," Janine snapped. "I saw the picture, the one with that scruffy boy. You look ridiculous, laughing like a hyena while your family is being dragged through the mud." "I looked happy," I corrected her. "I know that is a foreign concept to you." "Happy," Janine scoffed. "You are selfish. That is what you are. Do you have any idea what it has been like here? The phone hasn't stopped ringing. People are whispering at the club. Mrs. Halstead asked me yesterday if you were having a mental breakdown. I had to tell her you were just working through some things. You are embarrassing me. Harper, you are making us look dysfunctional." "We are dysfunctional," I said. "I just stopped pretending we weren't." "You disappeared like a child," she hissed, "running away in the middle of the night, stealing the guest book." "I didn't steal it," I said. "I left it in the motel room you booked for me, room 12. You can probably pick it up from Lost and Found, if they haven't thrown it out." There was a silence on the line. I could hear her breathing, a ragged, furious sound. "This little game of yours is over," Janine said, her voice dropping to a command tone. "The rumors are affecting the merger. Grant's father is asking questions about instability in the gene pool. You need to fix this." "Fix what?" I asked. "The narrative." Janine said, "I have drafted a statement. You are going to post it on your little channel. It says that the room-canceled story was a fictionalized drama piece, not a memoir. It says you are on good terms with the family and that you regret the confusion. And then, you are going to announce that you are taking a break for your mental health." I almost laughed. It was so classic Janine. Rewrite the script, cast me as the crazy one, and smooth out the edges before the audience notices the cracks. "And," she added, "I see you are doing a live show in Wisconsin next month. I want tickets. VIP. Sloan and I will come. We will take a photo together backstage, smiling, to show everyone that we are a united front." My hand froze over the plant. She wanted to come to my show. She wanted to use my stage, my microphone, my success, as a prop to rehabilitate her image. She wanted to stand next to me and smile, erasing everything she had done with one well-lit photograph. "No," I said. The word hung in the air. It was small, but it felt heavy, like a stone dropped into a still lake. "Excuse me," Janine said. "No," I repeated. "I am not posting your statement. I am not saying it was fiction, and you are not coming to my show." "You listen to me," Janine's voice rose, vibrating with shock. "I am your mother. I made you. I sacrificed everything for you." "Stop," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was hard enough to cut glass. "You didn't sacrifice for me, Janine. You sacrificed me. You sacrificed me for Sloan. You sacrificed me for the Halstead merger. You sacrificed me for a seat at the head table. You fed me to your ambition piece by piece, and now you are angry because I finally climbed off the plate. How dare you?" she whispered. I gave you a home. I gave you a life. You gave me a role, I said, and I quit. If you don't do this, Janine threatened, her voice turning icy, I will sue you. I have lawyers. Harper, real lawyers. I will sue you for defamation. I will sue you for emotional distress. I will bury you in legal fees until you are back waiting tables in Mesa. Go ahead, I said. What? Sue me. I said, please, file the paperwork tomorrow, because my lawyer, Kendra Miles, is dying to present Exhibit A in court. What exhibit? Janine asked, and for the first time, I heard a flicker of fear. The loan documents. Mother, I said. The $50,000 line of credit you opened in my name. The one with the digital signature that was traced back to your IP address. The one you used to pay for the wedding I was kicked out of. Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. That is a felony, I continued, leaning against the counter. Identity theft, bank fraud, wire fraud. If you sue me, if you even talk about me in public, I will hand that file to the district attorney, and I won't just bury you in legal fees. I will put you in prison. You wouldn't, she breathed. I am your mother. Then start acting like it, I said. From this moment on, you do not call me, you do not text me, you do not show up at my apartment, you do not come to my show. Any communication goes through Kendra. If I see your number on my phone again, I press charges. Do you understand? She didn't answer. I could hear the background noise of her house, the hum of the expensive refrigerator, the ticking of the grandfather clock, the sounds of the life she was desperate to keep. Goodbye, Janine, I said. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. They were shaking from the adrenaline of finally, after 31 years, putting down the heavy weight I had been carrying. I felt lightheaded. I felt clean. A moment later, my email pinged. It wasn't Janine. It was Sloan. I sat down at the table and opened it. It was a long block of text, devoid of paragraph breaks, written in the frantic, stream of consciousness style Sloan used when she wanted something. Harper, I don't know what is going on with you and Mom, but you need to stop. This is hurting me. Do you know how hard it is to plan a wedding and now handle this PR nightmare? I thought we were sisters. I thought we were a team. Remember when we were little and you used to braid my hair? Remember when you helped me with my history final? We are blood. You can't just turn your back on blood because of a hotel room. It is petty. Please, just issue the statement. Do it for me. I am stressed out enough as it is. I read it twice. Do it for me. That was the thesis statement of Sloane's entire existence. There was no apology. Not a single word about the room. Not a word about the credit card fraud. Not a word about the fact that she had stood by and watched her mother erase me from the family photos. She didn't miss me. She missed my utility. She missed the person who braided her hair and took her tests and fixed her problems. I didn't reply. I forwarded the email to Kendra with a note. Add to the harassment file. Then, my phone buzzed again with a text. It was Sloan. She must have realized I wasn't replying to the email. You think you are so important. The text read, you think this is your big moment. You are just a bitter, jealous girl who couldn't handle not being the center of attention. Nobody cares about your little story. Harper, they only care because it is about me. You are nothing without us. I looked at the words glowing on the screen. You are nothing without us. For years. I had believed that. I had believed that I was a satellite, and they were the planet. I believed that without their gravity, I would drift off into the cold dark and die. But I looked around my apartment. I looked at the sunlight hitting the floorboards. I looked at the contract for my show sitting on the desk. I looked at the picture of Elliot and me on the fridge. I wasn't drifting. I was orbiting a new sun, one that I had ignited myself. I typed a reply. I didn't send it. I just typed it out to see how it looked. I am not the one who needs a fake loan to pay for a party. I am not the one who needs a sister to be invisible so I can shine. I am not nothing. I am finally free. I deleted the draft. She didn't deserve my words. She didn't deserve my energy. I blocked her number. The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. That evening, Elliot came over with takeout. He saw the look on my face, the exhaustion, but also the strange, calm resolve. "Rough day?" he asked, handing me a container of pad thai. "The roughest," I said. "I fired my family." He paused, his chopsticks halfway to his mouth. "You did what?" "I told them no," I said. "I told them if they come near me, I will press charges for the identity theft. I drew the line, Elliot. I drew it in concrete." He smiled. It was a slow, proud smile that made my heart do a flip. "Good," he said. "They were crowding the frame anyway." We ate on the floor, watching a documentary about penguins. It was peaceful. It was normal. But later that night, as I lay in bed listening to the city sounds of Chicago, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Sloane's text. "Nobody cares about your little story." She was wrong. People cared. Millions of people cared. But she was right about one thing. They were coming. Janine had backed down today because I surprised her. I had hit her with the legal threat before she could ready her defenses. But Janine Rodriguez did not lose wars. She retreated, regrouped, and came back with heavier artillery. She wouldn't sue me. That would require public records. That would expose the fraud. No, she would do something dirtier. She would try to destroy my credibility without ever stepping into a courtroom. She would try to poison the water so that no one would want to drink from my well again. I rolled over and looked at the ceiling. "Let them come," I whispered. I wasn't the girl in the hotel lobby anymore, crying over a reservation. I was the woman who held the receipts, and if they wanted to drag me back into the mud, I would make sure I pulled them down with me. The live show in Wisconsin was 2 weeks away. It was going to be the biggest night of my career, and I had a feeling, a deep, sinking feeling in my gut, that the Rodriguez family wasn't going to let me have the spotlight without a fight. But this time, I wasn't saving them a seat. I woke up 3 days later to the smell of burning bridges. It started with a Google alert I had set for my own name. At 6 a.m, my phone lit up with a link to an article on a site called The National Reviewer, a tabloid that usually focused on political scandals and celebrity divorces. The headline was not subtle. "Ungrateful Daughter, the Dark Truth Behind the Viral Spare Room." Sensation. I sat up in bed, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I clicked the link. The article was a masterpiece of creative nonfiction. It painted a portrait of a troubled young woman who had been supported financially and emotionally by her family for decades, only to turn on them for internet fame. It cited anonymous sources who claimed I had a history of pathological lying and attention-seeking behavior. It even mentioned a generous family loan that I had supposedly defaulted on a twisted, funhouse mirror version of the fraudulent debt Janine had taken out in my name. I read the sentences, and I could hear my mother's voice in every syllable. The phrasing was hers. Pathological, generous, emotional support. It was Janine's vocabulary weaponized against me. She hadn't sued me. She had launched a smear campaign. She was trying to destroy my reputation so that when I finally did speak, no one would believe me. By noon, the damage was tangible. Daphne called me. "The mattress sponsor is pausing the campaign," she said, her voice tight. "They are worried about brand alignment, and the university in Oregon sent an email asking for clarification on the allegations. Harper, we are bleeding credibility." "It is a lie," I said, pacing my living room. "All of it. She is spinning the fraud into a story about me being a deadbeat." "I know it is a lie," Daphne said. "But the internet doesn't care about truth. It cares about noise. And right now, your mother is making a lot of noise. We have 2 choices. We can issue a boring legal denial that nobody will read, or we can shut up and hope it blows over." "Neither," I said. I stopped pacing. I looked at the spider plant on my windowsill. "We don't deny, we don't hide, we amplify." "What do you mean?" Daphne asked. "I am going to release a special episode," I said. "Tonight, no script, no metaphors, just the receipts. Harper, Daphne warned. If you name them, if you get specific, you open yourself up to a real lawsuit. I won't name them, I said. I won't use the name Rodriguez. I won't say Halstead. I will just tell a story about a girl, a room, and a loan. But this time, Daphne, I am not just going to tell it, I am going to show it. We recorded that night. It wasn't like the other episodes. There was no soft piano music. There was no poetic intro. It was stark. It was forensic. I sat in the booth, holding the stack of documents Kendra and I had gathered. They say there are two sides to every story, I began, my voice low and clear. But sometimes there are not two sides. Sometimes there is just the truth and the lie someone tells to cover it up. I walked the listeners through the timeline. I didn't just tell them I was kicked out of my room. I read the timestamp on the reservation log Raina had given me. 7:12 a.m., authorized by mother, priority to investor. I didn't just tell them about the identity theft. I described the PDF of the loan agreement. I described the fake signature. I described the IP address that traced back to a luxury home in Whitefish, Montana. They call me ungrateful, I said into the microphone. They say I abandoned them. But how do you abandon people who have already sold your seat to the highest bidder? How do you owe loyalty to a system that uses your name to finance a party you aren't allowed to attend? I ended the episode with a simple statement about the nature of family. Family isn't a shield, I said. For some of us, it is a weapon, and just because you share blood, it doesn't mean you have to bleed for them forever. We titled the episode, The Receipt. It went live at midnight. By the time I woke up, the internet had done what the internet does best. It had weaponized its collective outrage. But not at me. The comments section was a flood of validation. Listeners were posting their own screenshots of toxic texts from parents. They were dissecting the timeline I had laid out. And crucially, the amateur sleuths were at work. They didn't need names. They had Google. They connected the spare room to the Gilded Cage article. They found the Rodriguez family. They found the Halstead merger. But the real blow came from a direction Janine hadn't anticipated. Elliot's friend at the Tribune, the investigative reporter named Sarah, had been busy. While my episode was trending on Twitter, Sarah published her piece. It wasn't about family drama. It was about money. Mountain of debt. The shadowy finances of Beckett Crane and High Altitude Holdings. The article was a bombshell. It laid out everything Kendra had suspected and more. It exposed the shell companies. It exposed the predatory loans to families desperate to keep up appearances, families just like mine. It detailed the expedited permits scheme that Beckett had bragged about at the wedding. And right there, in the third paragraph, was the connection that sank the ship. High Altitude Holdings recently issued high-interest loans to several parties connected to the controversial Halstead land development deal. It didn't name Janine directly, but it didn't have to. The connection was made. The Halstead merger wasn't just a business deal. It was being financed by a Ponzi scheme. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Grant Halstead's family company stock took a nosedive. Investors panicked. The partners, who had been so eager to shake Beckett's hand, were suddenly issuing statements distancing themselves from Crane Capital. And then, my phone buzzed. It was a text, not from Janine, not from a lawyer, from Sloan. Harper. Please, what do you know about Beckett? Grant is freaking out. The bank just froze our joint accounts. Dad is screaming at Mom. They are saying the wedding loan is fraudulent. Did you do this? I looked at the message. For the first time. Her voice wasn't imperious. It wasn't dismissive. It was terrified. Did you do this? No. I thought, you did this. You built your castle on a swamp, and now you are surprised that you are sinking. Then came a second text from Sloan. Please help me. I don't know what is happening. Mom is locking herself in her room. Grant is looking at me like I am the enemy. I am scared. Harper, you are the only one who is smart about this stuff. There it was. The pivot. The moment the predator realizes it is actually prey and tries to appeal to the empathy of the person it was hunting 5 minutes ago. She didn't want a sister. She wanted a consultant. She wanted the fixer back. I started to type a reply. I wanted to say, "I told you so." I wanted to say, "Good luck with the logistics." But I stopped. That was the old game. That was the game where I engaged, where I reacted, where I let their chaos dictate my emotional state. I deleted the draft. Instead, I sent a screenshot of the contact information for a legal aid clinic in Montana that specialized in financial fraud. "You need a lawyer. Sloan, not a sister." I hit send, and then I muted the conversation. An hour later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a Chicago area code. "This is Harper," I answered. "Ms. Rodriguez, this is Agent Miller with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division." My heart stopped. "Yes. We are opening an investigation into Beckett Crane and his associates regarding wire fraud and racketeering," Agent Miller said. His voice was professional, detached. "We have reason to believe you are a victim of identity theft related to one of his shell companies. We also understand you may have information regarding statements made by Mr. Crane about bribing county officials." Yes, I said. "I do. We would like to speak with you," he said. "We know you have a public event coming up in Wisconsin. We can meet you there, or you can come to our field office in Chicago tomorrow." "Wisconsin?" I asked. "Why Wisconsin?" "We believe Mr. Crane may be attempting to attend the event," the agent said. "He has been tracking your location. We think he views you as a loose end." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the winter wind. Beckett Crane was coming to my show, the man who stole my room, the man who ruined my credit, the man who corrupted my family. He was coming to find me. He probably thought he could intimidate me. He probably thought he could buy my silence, or threaten me into retracting the story. "Agent Miller," I said, my voice steadying. "Meet me in Wisconsin. Come to the show." "Are you sure? Ms. Rodriguez? We can bring him in before that." "No," I said. A plan was forming in my mind. A final, perfect ending to the story I had been writing for 31 years. "Let him come. Let him walk right into the room he thinks he owns." I hung up the phone. I walked over to the window. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street. Janine had tried to smear me. Sloan had tried to use me. Beckett had tried to erase me. But they had made a fatal error. They thought they were playing a game of PR, a game of appearances. They didn't realize I was playing a game of truth. And in a game of truth, the person holding the receipts always wins. I looked at the date on my calendar. The live show was in 3 days. It wasn't just a performance anymore. It was a trap, and they were walking straight into it. The venue was a lakeside estate in Wisconsin, a sprawling structure of glass and timber that hugged the shoreline of Lake Geneva. It was beautiful, but unlike the Cedar Glass Lodge, it did not feel like a fortress. It felt like a sanctuary. This was the venue for the season finale of The Spare Room, a live recording event that had sold out in 48 minutes. I stood in the lobby, checking the guest list, but I wasn't checking it to see who I could exclude. I was checking it to make sure the people who mattered were treated like royalty. "Harper." I turned around. Standing near the entrance, looking hesitant and clutching a small overnight bag, was Raina. I had flown her out. First class. I walked over and hugged her, breathing in the scent of rain and hotel soap that clung to her coat. She stiffened for a moment, surprised, then hugged me back. "I can't believe I'm here," Raina said, pulling back to look at the high ceilings. "This place is insane, and you paid for my flight. You really didn't have to do that." "You gave me the map when I was lost in the dark," I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a key card. It wasn't for a standard room. "This is for the Lakeview Suite. It has a jacuzzi, a fireplace, and the best view on the property, and nobody's going to kick you out of it." Raina looked at the key, her eyes filling with tears. It wasn't just a room, it was a correction. It was me reaching back into the past and fixing the moment where the universe had been cruel. "Thank you," she whispered. "Go get settled," I said. "Show starts in 2 hours." I watched her walk toward the elevators. I felt a hand on my back. It was Elliot. He was wearing a suit that fit him perfectly, a stark contrast to his usual rumpled corduroy. Tonight was big for us, not just professionally. In his pocket, I knew there was a ring box. We hadn't announced it. We were keeping it for ourselves. A private joy that no audience, no matter how loyal, was entitled to witness. "Security just radioed," Elliot said, his voice low. "They are at the gate." I didn't have to ask who they were. "Did they buy tickets?" I asked, smoothing the silk of my jumpsuit. "No," Elliot said. "They are demanding to see you. They are saying they are family." I took a deep breath. The air in the estate smelled of lavender and wood smoke. It smelled like peace. "Okay," I said. "Let them in, but only as far as the courtyard. I will meet them there." I walked out the side doors into the stone courtyard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in violent streaks of orange and purple. Janine and Sloane were standing near the fountain. They looked like refugees from a lifestyle magazine that had gone out of print. Janine was wearing a Chanel suit, but it looked slightly wrinkled, as if she had been sitting in a car for hours. Her hair, usually an impenetrable helmet, was windblown. Sloane looked smaller than I remembered. She was pale, her eyes darting around the estate with a mix of envy and fear. When Janine saw me, she straightened her spine. The old reflex kicked in, the need to dominate the frame. "This is unacceptable," Janine announced, her voice echoing off the stone walls. "We drove 5 hours. The guard at the gate treated us like commoners. We are your family." "Harper, you are guests without tickets," I said, stopping 10 feet away. "And the event is sold out." "We need to talk," Sloane said, her voice trembling. Grant is in trouble. The bank called the loan. They are talking about seizing the house. Harper, you have to tell them it was a mistake." "It wasn't a mistake," I said. "It was math. You borrowed money from a criminal to pay for a lie. Now the bill is due." "He is not a criminal," Janine snapped. "Beckett is a visionary. He is just having a liquidity issue because of the rumors you started." "Is that so?" The voice came from the shadows of the archway. Beckett Crane stepped into the courtyard. I hadn't invited him, but I knew he would come. A narcissist cannot resist the spotlight, especially when he thinks he can steal it. He looked terrible. His tan was fading into a sickly yellow. His suit was expensive, but he wore it like a costume he was afraid of losing. He walked toward us, ignoring Janine and Sloane. His eyes locked on me. "Harper," Beckett said, flashing a smile that was all teeth and panic. "Impressive setup. You have done well for yourself." "What are you doing here, Beckett?" I asked. "I am here to offer you a deal," he said, stepping closer. "This investigation. It is a misunderstanding, but it is messy for everyone. I have connections. I can make the debt disappear. I can make your mother's identity theft charge vanish. All I need is a retraction, a joint statement tonight. We go on stage. We laugh. We say it was all a misunderstanding for ratings." He looked at Janine. "Tell her. Janine, tell her we can fix this." Janine looked at him, desperate hope flaring in her eyes. Yes, Harper, listen to him. We can be a family again. We can put this behind us." I looked at them, the trinity of my trauma, the mother who sold me, the sister who used me, and the man who bought me. They were all conspiring to pull me back into the dark so they could feel safe. "You think you can negotiate with the truth," I said to Beckett. "Everyone has a price." Beckett sneered. "I know yours. You want to be seen, I will make you a star. I will fund your studio. I will give you everything." "I already have everything," I said. I looked past him, toward the tree line. "Now," I said softly. 2 men in dark suits stepped out from behind the hedges. They didn't have guns drawn. They didn't shout. They just walked with the heavy, inevitable purpose of the law. Agent Miller stepped into the light. "Beckett Crane," Miller said. "I am with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You are under arrest for wire fraud, securities fraud, and racketeering." Beckett froze. The arrogant smile slid off his face like oil. "This is a mistake. I am a partner in the Halstead deal. You can't touch me." "The Halstead deal is dead," Miller said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "And so is your shell company. Turn around." It happened in silence. The click of the metal cuffs was the loudest sound in the world. Beckett didn't fight. Bullies never fight when the power dynamic actually shifts. He just slumped, looking suddenly small and gray. Janine let out a strangled sound. She watched as the man she had practically worshipped, the man she had kicked her own daughter out of a room for, was led away like a common thief. The agents walked him to a black sedan parked in the driveway. The door slammed. I turned back to my mother and sister. The reality hit Janine all at once. The denial shattered. She looked at the empty space where Beckett had been, and then she looked at me. Her face crumbled. "Harper," she said, and her voice broke. It wasn't the voice of the matriarch anymore. It was the voice of an old, scared woman. "Harper, please, you have to help us. They are going to come for the house. They are going to come for everything. I will apologize. Is that what you want?" "I am sorry. I am so sorry about the room. I will fix it. I will make it right." She took a step toward me, reaching out a hand. "I will be the mother you want," she sobbed. "Just help us." I looked at her hand. It was the same hand that had signed the fraudulent loan. It was the same hand that had pushed me out of the family photo. "You don't want to fix it." "Mom," I said gently. I do, she cried. "No," I said. "You just want to put me back in my position. You want the fixer back. You want the spare part to plug the hole in the sinking ship." I reached into my clutch. I pulled out a white envelope. I didn't hand it to Janine. I handed it to Sloane. "What is this?" Sloane asked, wiping her eyes. "Is it a check?" "No," I said. "It is a list." Sloane opened it. "These are 3 of the best defense attorneys in Montana who handle financial fraud," I said. "And the bottom list is for legal aid clinics if you can't afford the retainers. I also included a guide on how to freeze your credit so Mom can't use your name like she used mine." Sloane stared at me. "That is it. You aren't going to pay the debt. You aren't going to save us." "I am saving you," I said. "I am saving you from the delusion that someone else is going to clean up your mess. This is your life. Sloane, you wanted to be the main character. This is the plot twist. Handle it." I stepped back. The distance between us felt infinite. But for the first time, it didn't feel lonely. It felt safe. "You can't leave us here," Janine wailed. "We are family." "I know," I said. "And that is why I am not calling the police on you for the identity theft today. That is my mercy. The rest is up to you." I turned around. I didn't look back. I heard Janine calling my name, but the sound was fading, drowned out by the noise of the crowd inside the venue. They were chanting, "Harper, Harper, Harper." I walked through the double doors. Elliot was waiting in the wings. He looked at me, scanning my face for damage. "You okay?" he asked. "I am done," I said, and I meant it. The story was finished. The book was closed. "Ready to go on?" he asked. "Never been more ready," I said. I walked onto the stage. The lights hit me. The roar of the audience was physical, a wave of sound that washed over me. There were 1,000 people in the room. I saw Raina in the front row, wiping her eyes. I saw Daphne nodding from the side stage. I walked to the microphone. The stool was there. The glass of water was there. I sat down. The room went silent. I looked out at the sea of faces. I knew that in this room, there were hundreds of people who felt like spare parts. People who had been told they were too loud, too difficult, too much, or not enough. "You know," I said, my voice echoing through the hall, steady and strong. "For a long time, I thought my value was determined by how much space I could shrink myself into. I thought if I made myself small enough, if I was convenient enough, eventually, someone would give me a seat at the table." I paused. I took a sip of water. "But I learned the hard way," I continued. There are some people who will only remember you when you become valuable to them. They will treat you like a placeholder until something better comes along. I looked directly into the camera that was live streaming to the world. But you were not born to be a spare room for anyone, I said. You are the whole house. You are the foundation. And if they don't have a reservation, they don't get to come in. The crowd erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It was a standing ovation. It was the sound of people recognizing their own worth. I smiled. I stood up. I walked off the stage, past the microphone, past the lights. Elliot was waiting for me in the shadows. I took his hand. We walked out the back door, toward the lake, toward the quiet, toward a life where I would never, ever have to ask permission to exist again. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have ever felt like the spare room in your own family, or if you have ever had to draw a hard line to save your own soul, I want to hear from you. Please leave a comment down below telling me where you are listening from and share your thoughts. Let's support each other in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people who need to hear it. See you in the next one.